Because every time you follow through on something you said you would do for yourself, you reinforce a message that you're worth showing up for. Well, hello, my friend, and welcome back to the Redefining Midlife podcast. I'm your host, Jo Clark, and whether you are a brand new listener or someone who has been a part of this podcast community for a long time, I'm just so glad that you're here with me today. And I also want to say a very big thank you for the lovely messages and the feedback from the past few shows. I really do love hearing from you and how the podcast is helping you to make the most of this stage of life. And if an episode has actually resonated with you, I also encourage you, send it along to another midlife woman who would also enjoy and benefit from the information. I'd love for this show to grow. So just a small thing like that will actually help the podcast reach more midlife women and make their day. Because you never really know just how much somebody might need to hear a certain topic or information. Well, let's get on to our episode for today. I know it's one that you're going to relate to because we're going to be talking about putting yourself first without the heavy burden of guilt. And as you know, this can be much easier said than done because it sounds really simple on the surface, but it's anything but simple for many women in midlife, especially when you're a parent or a carer or both. I want to share with you a story that stayed with me for decades. It happened after I had my first baby, and a very close friend said something that made me laugh out loud at the time. She said, well, you deliver your baby, but then that space gets filled with equal parts guilt and worry for the rest of your life. I laughed at the time because it did feel really dramatic, but I soon discovered that underneath that humor, there was something that was so relatable. You know, it's that quiet, ever-present sense that you're not quite doing enough. You're not quite getting it right, or perhaps you're wanting something that feels just a little bit selfish. For many of us, we were raised by women who put themselves last because that's what was expected of them in that time. Our mothers and our grandmothers, they often carried enormous responsibility, and they did so without any complaint. They kept the families running. They supported their partners. They managed the households. And sometimes they worked outside the home as well. And they rarely spoke about their own needs. And it wasn't that they didn't have dreams or desires. It was just that their generation was often taught that a good woman sacrificed first and they asked questions later. So if that was our role model when we were growing up, if that was our version of womanhood that we watched every single day, well then, of course, it's going to feel uncomfortable for us to do it differently. No wonder putting yourself first can feel foreign or weird or even wrong. We aren't just changing a habit, we're actually gently rewriting a story that has been passed down for generations. And I think that for many women, that guilt doesn't disappear when the children grow up. It just changes shape. Now, in your 20s or your 30s, it might be guilt about having a work-life balance. Maybe for those of you who had children, it was about childcare choices, about taking time for yourself. And then in your 40s and your 50s, it might become guilt about wanting a career shift, or about investing time and energy in your health, or about saying no to family demands, or about taking a weekend away, or needing a break. Somewhere along the way, we internalize the idea that if we put ourselves first, even occasionally, we're being selfish. If you're caring for aging parents or supporting other family members, the guilt can feel even heavier. When someone relies on you physically or emotionally, it is so easy to believe that your needs must automatically come second. And you might even tell yourself certain things like, they need me more than I need that time out or that rest or that break. And while caregiving is actually an act of love, it really can quietly become all-consuming. The truth is, sustainable care requires a well carer. So if you're constantly exhausted, overwhelmed, or running on empty, Everyone does actually feel it, including the person you're trying so hard to support. Taking the time to rest or to reset, to look after your own health, isn't abandoning them. It is actually ensuring that you can continue to show up with patience, steadiness, and compassion over the long term. I see these different scenarios all the time in the different women that I coach and I mentor. They're intelligent, capable, generous women, and they've spent decades being everything to everyone. They're often the organizer, the emotional support, the steady one, the reliable one. They've built their families, their careers, and often communities. And then midlife arrives with its many transitions. Children become more independent or they leave home. Parents age. Careers plateau or they might start to feel unfulfilling. And then suddenly there's more space and time. And that can feel really unsettling because when there's space, the questions start to rise up. Questions like, what do I want? And right behind that question often comes guilt. So why do we feel guilty for wanting something for ourselves? Well, I believe it's part of conditioning. Because as I said earlier, many of us were raised watching women who put themselves last. It was modelled as a virtue. Self-sacrifice was praised and it was expected. The woman who kept everything together quietly in the background, well, she was admired. And if she ever did prioritise herself, it was often framed as indulgent or unnecessary. Over time, we as women absorb that messaging. It becomes our internal script. So when we do begin to challenge it in midlife, our nervous system reacts. It feels unfamiliar. It feels really uncomfortable. And just start to recognize when this comes up for you. And then when it does, it's an opportunity for you to reframe it. Because guilt is not always a sign that you're doing something wrong. Sometimes it's simply a sign that you're doing something different. Putting yourself first doesn't mean that you're abandoning your responsibilities. And it doesn't mean that you stop caring about others. It doesn't mean that you're blowing up your life or walking away from the people who matter. It means that you're recognizing that you matter too. That your health, your energy, your dreams, your emotional well-being are not optional extras. They are actually foundation to being human. In my work, I often talk about the 6 pillars of wellness. Because when one of these pillars is ignored for too long, the whole structure becomes unstable and things start to go wrong. And the pillars are movement, nutrition, sleep and rest, stress management, purpose and connection, and hormone health. Now, if you consistently push your own needs way to the bottom of the list, one or more of these pillars starts to begin to wobble. And you'll start to feel it in your body, and you feel it in your mood. You even start to feel it in your patience. Maybe you feel it in your relationships. And here's something important and something that's often missed. When you're run down and depleted, you're not your best self for anyone. When you're chronically tired or resentful, stressed or disconnected from your own sense of purpose, that energy leaks out. And like I said before, the very thing they're often trying to protect is by putting yourself last often, that thing starts to suffer. So let's talk about how we can begin to put ourselves first without drowning in all of that guilt. And as I share, I just encourage you, notice the chatter that happens in your head. Maybe write it down on a piece of paper. What are you actually saying to yourself? Notice the exact words that you use. Notice the stories that you have and what comes up with as far as feelings go. And as with all things in personal development, the first step is that awareness. It's about noticing when you're currently abandoning yourself. Maybe it's in really small ways. Maybe it's about always saying yes when you want to say no. Maybe it's about never booking the appointment that you really need to do for your health and wellness. Maybe it's you skipping the walk that you want. Maybe it's staying up late, scrolling, even though you are exhausted. Maybe it's not speaking up when something matters to you. These things might seem minor, but over time, they actually do add up. Now, the second step is starting small. This isn't about grand gestures, it's about small, consistent acts of self respect. Maybe you can book that checkup that you've been postponing, or block an hour a week that's yours and protecting that at all costs. Maybe it's going to bed earlier, or asking some help for doing a task, preparing meals in advance so your future self is supported. Like there are lots of things that you can do, and those small steps build self-trust, and that's powerful. Because every time you follow through on something you said you would do for yourself, you reinforce a message that you're worth showing up for. Another important shift is reframing. And instead of asking, is this selfish? Ask, does it support my health, my growth, or my needs? And if the answer is yes, then it's very likely not selfish and more likely it's responsible. Responsible to your body, your future. Responsible to the version of you who wants to feel strong, capable, and alive in this next chapter. Midlife isn't about shrinking or quietly fading into the background once those big roles of earlier life have been ticked off the list. It's actually a powerful turning point. It's a chance for you to pause, reflect, and then consciously choose how you want to live that second half of your life. And it takes courage. And part of that courage is learning to sit with a little bit of guilt as you try new ways of doing things and being, and start putting yourself back into the picture. You might feel a little pang when you say no to something that drains you. You might feel uncomfortable investing time or money in yourself. And that inner voice, it might still pop up, questioning your choices. Let it be there, because you don't have to listen to every thought you have, and you certainly don't have to believe it. You can notice the guilt and still choose what feels right for you and the life that you're creating at this stage. There's something deeper going on in midlife too, and that's identity. For a long time, you are, or maybe you've been tied up in what you do for everyone else. The caregiver, the professional, the organizer, the problem solver. So when you start asking what you want now, who you're becoming, and what actually lights you up, it can feel unsettling. And on the other hand, it can also feel incredibly freeing. You're more than the roles that you played, I should say, and you're allowed to change. And I do want to say this gently, but honestly. If you don't choose to prioritize yourself at some point, your body often steps in and does it for you. Burnout, ongoing stress, hormonal chaos, emotional exhaustion. Those things, well, they don't usually come out of nowhere. They're often the result of years of putting yourself last. So choosing yourself sooner isn't selfish. It's wise, so don't be guilty. There's also something very powerful to remember here, especially if there are younger women watching you. It might be daughters, nieces, students, colleagues. Because just as your own mother and the mother before you quietly showed you what was normal, you're actually modeling something now too. And our actions speak louder than words, because these women, the younger women, are watching you. What if they got to see a woman who values herself, who listens to her body and makes choices that honour her life, not just everybody else's? That's something worth passing on. That's a special kind of legacy that you can leave younger women. And if this is landing for you and you're thinking, I don't even know where to start, you don't have to have it all worked out on your own. Because, this is exactly the kind of work that I do with women in my private mentoring. Because we just gently look at where you're at now, what's feeling off, and then what small intentional changes are going to help you to create a life that gives you energy instead of draining it. We unpack the guilt and we question the old stories that you've been carrying for a long time, and then build a way forward that includes you, not just everyone else. So if you would like a little bit more support or direction around doing something for you, I would genuinely love to hear from you. And you can send me a DM on Instagram, or you could email me at joe@joeclarkcoaching.com, or visit my website, joeclarkcoaching.com, to book a connection call, or just head to the link in the show notes to explore how and what working together might look like for us. And sometimes the most powerful step is just simply starting the conversation. When I think back to that comment that my friend made all of those years ago about guilt replacing space, at this stage in my life, I see it very differently. Space doesn't have to be filled with guilt. That space can be filled with growth, with clarity, strength, and self-respect. It can be filled with intention. Midlife is your chance to ask, what do I want in this next chapter? How do I want to feel? Do I want to feel strong, intentional, joyful, purposeful? Whatever that answer might be for you, it's going to require you to put yourself somewhere on that list. Not at the bottom, not as an afterthought, but included with a lot of intention and with care. So as you move through these next few days and weeks, just notice what comes up for you. Notice where you're putting yourself on the list and whether you feel guilty when you think about choosing yourself. And it's not to judge, and it's just to notice. So even one small choice that includes you, that is often enough for things to start to shift. Midlife isn't asking you to do everything differently. It's just simply inviting you to be a part of your own life again. And that on its own is a really, really powerful place to begin. Have a wonderful rest of the week. I hope you enjoyed our chat, and we'll see you next time. Bye. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, please rate, follow, and share it with another incredible midlife woman. And join me next week as we keep creating an amazing second half of life.